Halloween had always been a time of excitement and spooked delight for most kids in our town, but for a group of friends, it turned into a night that would haunt them for years. It all began with the legend of the old Hollow Street Mansion, a house long abandoned and whispered about as cursed. No one had lived there for decades, yet strange lights and ghostly shadows were often reported by those daring enough to walk past after dusk. It was a crisp October evening when my friends and I decided to challenge ourselves. Armed with flashlights, a couple of cameras, and a shared thrill for the supernatural, we approached the mansion just as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. The gate creaked loudly when we pushed it open, as if the house itself was warning us to stay away. But curiosity outweighed caution, and we crossed the threshold onto the overgrown front lawn. The mansion loomed above us, its windows like dark, watching eyes, and the wind whispered through the cracks in the shutters, sounding eerily like distant voices. As we stepped inside, the air turned cold, the kind that sinks into your bones. Dust motes danced in the beams of our flashlights, and every creak of the floorboards sounded exaggerated in the silence. One of my friends, Mark, pointed toward a staircase where shadows seemed to shift unnaturally. "Did you guys see that?" he whispered, his voice shaking. We all froze, eyes wide. For a brief second, a dark figure appeared at the top of the stairs and then vanished as if swallowed by the darkness. We pressed on, exploring room after room, each one filled with remnants of a life long gone. Broken furniture, yellowed curtains, and cracked portraits staring down at us created an oppressive atmosphere. In the library, an old book fell from a shelf on its own, pages flipping wildly as though some unseen force was reading it. The room grew colder still, and I could see my breath forming small clouds in front of me. Then came the faint sound of whispering, soft, indistinct, but undeniably real. It seemed to circle around us, sometimes from the ceiling, sometimes from behind the walls. Panic started to set in, but our fear was mixed with a compulsive curiosity. Following the whispering, we found a narrow hallway leading to the basement. The door was heavy, but we managed to push it open. A foul, metallic smell wafted up, and the darkness seemed thicker here, almost tangible. Flashlights barely penetrated the gloom. As we descended the stairs, the whispering grew louder, transforming into indistinguishable phrases that sent chills down our spines. Then it happened. One of my friends, Sarah, screamed. In the corner of the basement, a figure crouched, its face hidden under a tattered hood. But the moment we shone our lights, it darted into the shadows, moving with impossible speed. Heart pounding, we tried to follow, but the basement seemed to twist unnaturally, corridors stretching and turning in ways that defied logic. Doors that led one way before now led elsewhere, and every step felt like we were being led deeper into a trap. Desperate to escape, we stumbled into a small room at the very back of the basement. It was empty except for a single mirror leaning against the wall. As we approached it, our reflections flickered strangely, not quite matching our movements. Then, in the reflection, behind us, we saw a figure, a pale, gaunt face with hollow eyes and a twisted grin that wasn't in the room. We spun around, but there was nothing there. The mirror reflected the impossible, showing us a reality that didn't exist, a reality that screamed of something far beyond human comprehension. Fear had reached its peak. Without another word, we bolted, racing up the stairs and out of the mansion, the sound of footsteps echoing behind us, even though no one followed. The gate slammed shut as we reached the lawn, leaving us panting, trembling, and forever changed. Years later, we learned that the mansion had a dark history, a family that vanished mysteriously, rumors of occult practices, and reports of previous explorers who never returned. Hollow Street Mansion wasn't just haunted, it seemed alive, feeding off fear, ensuring that those who entered never truly left untouched by it. That Halloween night, we didn't just experience a scare, we brushed against something ancient, something malevolent, and something that seemed to watch, waiting for the next curious soul foolish enough to cross its threshold. Halloween in our town was always filled with the usual excitement. Children in costumes running door to door, the air smelling of pumpkin spice and candle wax, and the occasional pranksters pulling harmless scares. But that year, something happened that would be remembered as one of the eeriest encounters any of us had ever experienced. It began late in the evening. My friend Lisa and I were heading back from a small Halloween party, carrying bags of candy, our laughter echoing in the quiet neighborhood. The streetlights cast long, warped shadows on the pavement, and the crisp autumn air made each breath sharp. Suddenly, we noticed a small figure standing at the edge of the sidewalk ahead. It was a little child, no more than 6 or 7, dressed in a vintage-style clown costume. The thing that caught our attention wasn't the costume itself, but the fact that the child's face was pale as chalk, completely expressionless, and the eyes... Oh, the eyes. They were black, void-like, sucking in the faint light around them. "Hey there, trick-or-treat," Lisa called out cautiously. The child didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head slightly and pointed to a house at the far end of the street. We exchanged uneasy glances. "We should keep walking," I whispered, but a strange pull made us follow. As we approached, the front porch light flickered on and off, casting the house in fits of shadow and glow. It looked abandoned, peeling paint and boarded windows, giving it an almost grotesque appearance. Yet the child's tiny hand continued to point insistently. Against every instinct, we stepped onto the porch. The door creaked open slowly, as if inviting us in. Inside, the air was heavy and smelled of decay, like old wood and damp earth. Our flashlights revealed peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and cobwebs thick enough to trip over. And then we heard it, the faintest giggle, high-pitched, hollow, echoing through the empty hallways. Lisa froze. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered, but it was too late. The child had disappeared. One moment it was pointing, the next, nothing. The only movement was a rocking chair swaying back and forth in the living room, though no one was in it. Panic bubbled up in my chest. We tried to leave, but the door we had entered through was now locked. No amount of pushing or shaking could budge it. That's when the whispers began. Soft at first, like wind rustling through leaves, but then clearer, almost intelligible. "Stay, play, forever." The temperature dropped drastically. Our breath was visible, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, almost reaching for us. Our flashlights flickered, and in the brief darkness, I thought I saw dozens of little figures darting around the walls, tiny, distorted silhouettes, their movements unnatural and jerky. Desperation took over. We scrambled upstairs, searching for another exit. Every hallway looked the same, doors leading to nowhere, stairs looping back on themselves. It was as if the house had become a labyrinth designed to trap us. Then, at the end of a narrow corridor, we saw it again, the clown child standing perfectly still. Its black eyes stared directly at us, and its tiny mouth opened impossibly wide in a smile that made our stomachs churn. Something compelled Lisa to step closer, to reach out, but I grabbed her arm. "Don't!" I shouted. That instant, the child vanished again, and in its place, hundreds of tiny footsteps echoed from every corner, growing louder, faster, until it was deafening. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, pulsing in and out as if the house had a heartbeat. With no other option, we ran blindly, turning corner after corner, each step echoing ominously. Finally, we burst through a side door, tumbling onto the overgrown backyard. The night air hit us like a wave. Panting and shaking, we looked back at the house. The windows were dark, silent, as if nothing had happened. The street was empty, except at the edge of the yard, the clown child stood again, just standing, watching, and slowly, impossibly, fading into the mist. We didn't speak until we were safely home. Both of us felt a lingering presence, an invisible weight pressing on our shoulders. Over the following weeks, reports started coming in from neighbors. Others had seen the same small figure on the same night, always pointing, always disappearing, and always followed by that same creeping sense of dread. Some said it was the spirit of a child who had vanished on Halloween decades ago. Others whispered that it was a manifestation of something far older, feeding on the fear of those who dared to witness it. Whatever it was, one thing was clear. We had encountered something that didn't belong in this world, something that would haunt the streets of our town every Halloween, waiting for its next victims. From that year onward, trick-or-treating was never the same. We avoided the old streets, the abandoned houses, and every Halloween, I couldn't shake the image of those black, hollow eyes staring into mine, silently promising that the game of fear was far from over. By the time Halloween rolled around that year, my friends and I had grown wary of strange occurrences. The tales from Hollow Street and the phantom trick-or-treater were already etched into our memories, leaving a lingering unease in everything we did. But no story, no warning, could have prepared us for what happened at my cousin's old farmhouse, an aging property on the outskirts of town. It was here that we encountered something far more intimate, far more terrifying, the mirror in the attic. The farmhouse had been in my cousin's family for generations. It creaked and groaned with age, and the attic had always been a place avoided by everyone except for storage. On Halloween night, with the wind howling outside and the branches scraping against the windows like skeletal fingers, my cousin dared us to explore it. Armed with flashlights and a sense of reckless bravery, we climbed the narrow staircase, each step groaning under our weight. The attic smelled of dust, wood rot, and something faintly metallic. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, old furniture draped in moth-eaten sheets, and in the far corner, leaning against the wall, was a full-length mirror. Its frame was ornate, carved with intricate patterns that seemed almost alive in the dim light. The glass, however, was unsettling. It didn't reflect the attic as it should. Instead, the image seemed slightly delayed, slightly distorted, and the shadows moved differently than they should. I stepped closer, and my reflection stared back, but it wasn't quite right. My eyes appeared darker, sunken, and my smile stretched a fraction too wide. I blinked, and the image didn't. Then I noticed movement behind me in the mirror, though I knew I was alone. A figure, pale and gaunt, crouched just out of reach, disappearing whenever I turned to look directly. A chill ran down my spine. "Did you see that?" I whispered, but the others were frozen in place, staring at their own reflections, faces twisted in horror. Slowly, the mirror seemed to ripple, as if liquid, distorting the attic entirely. Shadows thickened, creeping along the walls and floor, and the whispers started. Low at first, almost inaudible, then growing into coherent words. "Look, stay, forever." Panic set in. My cousin tried to step back, but it was as if the floor beneath the mirror had changed, forcing us closer. The reflections in the mirror were no longer our own. They were versions of us, but with hollow eyes, twisted grins, and movements that did not match ours. Each reflection reached out, mimicking the motions of our bodies while simultaneously doing things we weren't doing, clawing at the glass, beckoning and whispering. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut. Our flashlight beams flickered and dimmed, shadows dancing wildly across the walls. The air grew colder, almost suffocating, and the mirror's surface began to pulse faintly, a heartbeat of darkness, drawing our attention as if it had a life of its own. I realized with mounting terror that the reflections weren't just images. They were alive, aware, hungry. They wanted to step out into our world, to replace us, and the whispers were guiding them. One of my friends, Sam, screamed. His reflection had begun moving independently, reaching through the glass as though the mirror were water. Panic turned into chaos. We all tried to run, but every time we turned toward the attic door, the mirror seemed to shift, redirecting us, twisting the room into an impossible space. It was no longer a simple attic. It had become a trap, a gateway for the entities within the glass. Desperation pushed us forward. I remembered old folklore my grandmother had mentioned. Mirrors were portals, conduits for spirits that couldn't find rest. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed an old sheet from a nearby box and threw it over the mirror, hoping to obscure it. The reflections writhed beneath the fabric, slamming against the glass with deafening, supernatural force. The whispers reached a terrifying crescendo, almost shrieking, "We see you! We want you!" The next moments were a blur. Somehow we managed to force the attic door open and tumble down the stairs. The house seemed to sigh, releasing us from the attic's grip. We didn't stop running until we were outside, under the pale light of the moon, gasping and trembling, feeling the cold night air seep back into our bones. The mirror in the attic remained behind, still, silent, but we all knew it wasn't truly dormant. Something in that glass had marked us, and its hunger would return. Even now, I avoid mirrors in dimly lit rooms, especially at night. I never look too long at my reflection, never allow curiosity to linger.